A while back, Anita Sarkeesian did a speech on hate and heroism. At the same venue, Katherine Cross gave a lecture, How to End Online Harassment. I'd like to do a response video to this. This one starts off kinda slow, so you'll have to bear with me for a few minutes before it starts to get good.
We cannot end online harassment unless we understand what it is that actually causes it.
I could actually go into a lengthy discussion about whether you can end it even if you understand what causes it, but let's see where you go with this.
There are a number of myths that percolate in our societies about online harassment. Every single one of us in this room, I would wager, has heard that anonymity is one of the primary causes of harassment, or that people harass because they're anonymous, or that anonymity plus a computer equals antisocial behavior.
I think I see where you're going with this. I would say that being anonymous doesn't cause the harassment, as the desire to harass others is an issue with the individual.
And it's a commonplace that I've observed across the political spectrum, whether the person is left, right, center, libertarian, socialist, whatever their ethnic background or religious background, whether they are expert computer users and technologists or complete Luddites. People believe in the idea that anonymity is central to what motivates harassment, that it is the distinctive feature of the online world that makes it such a toxic place.
Being anonymous, however, inclines people with the tendency to harass to carry it out for various reasons, including less risk of being punished or held accountable.
And my work has led me to the conclusion that if we do continue down this path of simply blaming anonymity, then we will never actually address the problems that underlie online harassment. And in the process, we might also be denying a number of people what should constitute a civil right in terms of their ability to use the internet. That, in other words, you have the right to be anonymous, and that anonymity is not merely a negative absence of a legal identity, but that it is also a positive site of identity reconstruction.
You're talking about your conclusions based on your work, but I do agree with some of your points so far. The problems underlying harassment are not because people are anonymous, and I agree people should have the right to be anonymous.
And so, with all of that in mind, we need to understand that core principle, and this is the idea that I feel that my sociological research has brought into the discussion here. Simply put, anonymity does not cause harassment. It does play a role, but it's much, much more complicated than most people have made it out to be.
I still agree with your points, but you're talking about your sociological research, so I have to see what you have to present.
The reason that this is important to understand is because it's having a practical impact on the world right now. A number of websites, in their efforts to reform their noxious comment cultures, have moved in the direction of saying that commenters can no longer be anonymous, and that this will resolve the harassment problems that we've been experiencing. This will make comments nicer, this will make them more constructive.
The thing is, now you're talking about comment sections on websites. Nasty words on the internet don't necessarily constitute harassment. However, I can't dismiss that comment sections can play a part in harassment, so let's continue.
And the reality that has emerged is that this sort of isn't true. And I say sort of because what's happened is that it has changed the toxicity of those websites. It's changed them, but it's moved the nature of that toxicity around. So on websites where comments are not anonymous, what often ends up happening is that you'll have super toxic users posting things that they know will get deleted, but instead they target the moderators, the actual human beings that they know will have to read these comments as part of their jobs.
Although I have seen people target moderators, I've also seen people get suspended or banned for going after other members of the forum. Just because moderators try to clean up forums doesn't mean people will abide by the rules. They aren't always targeting moderators.
And so they will send them these really long, nasty, absolutely unpleasant, bigoted screeds because they know the moderators have to read it. And so the toxic commenter still manages to get one off at somebody, even though their legal name is attached.
That is true sometimes, but people also get in trouble for going after other people than the moderators. It doesn't mean their intent was to target a moderator who they know would read their comment.
Most of us are connected to Facebook. We know from personal experience, time and time again, that people say awful things to each other and to large groups of people on Facebook.
You were just talking about people targeting moderators when they lose their anonymity, just to talk about Facebook where people go after other people. I don't necessarily see a contradiction, just a slight difference in how we view it.
Because they feel they can get away with it. Because they feel that there is no accountability for their behavior. And accountability is a key word here, because that's why most people think anonymity is the problem. They understand intuitively that there is no accountability for bad behavior on the internet, but they assume that that's because you're anonymous. If you're anonymous, then there is no person, no legal identity to which accountability can accrue. You are faceless, you are formless.
So we're still trying to get to the underlying cause of harassment.
But that's not strictly accurate. This lovely topographical object is called a Mobius strip. It underlies the theory that I have articulated about the causes of online harassment in our society.
When I first watched this a few months ago, I was with you right up until this point. Then you went and said this.
It underlies the theory that I have articulated.
The theory you articulated with your research. It doesn't disprove what you are about to say, but I always get cautious when people start going from rock-solid facts to theories.
So a Mobius strip is a single-sided mathematical object with one side and one edge that gives the illusion of having two. And it's a useful tool that has come up again and again in psychoanalytics and philosophy and so on to explain how something that is contradictory can nevertheless exist in harmony.
Katherine describes a little more about the Mobius strip that I'm cutting out for time's sake, as I don't think it's necessary for this video.
So, why do I talk about the Mobius strip? Because the reality of online harassment emerges from the fact that we believe it is unreal, that we are socialized to approach the internet as a space of unreality.
This is where it gets interesting.
We are socialized by our media, we are socialized by our friends, our family members, our parents. I grew up with parents that were telling me that the people I talked to on the internet were not real.
You're talking about your parents who probably did not understand the internet. Oftentimes kids understand new technology better than their parents because they grew up with it. I want to play that section again, and I want everyone watching to picture how in the old days, parents worried violent video games may make their children violent.
We are socialized by our media, we are socialized by our friends, our family members, our parents. I grew up with parents that were telling me that the people I talked to on the internet were not real.
Katherine, I know media and family tried to tell us things about video games that we knew were not true. You can't so easily socialize people to believe things about the internet when the people who actually use it know better.
And these were parents that wanted to take care of me, that loved me, and they were also not terribly interested in technology.
My point exactly. They weren't interested in technology, so you understand it better than they do.
They were not the, hyper clued in, plugged in millennials or whatever the latest scapegoat is of the press these days. They were of the baby boomer generation, and they just thought that the internet wasn't real.
You're further reinforcing my point that they didn't understand it. You probably did, at least better than they did. If you understand it better than them, you would actually be more capable of socializing them to believe whatever you want them to believe.
And they and millions of other parents have raised their children with exactly the same idea.
If kids were so easily convinced by their parents to believe things like that, all the lies spewed about video games making people violent would be the reality we live in, but it isn't. If anything, the kids have to condition parents to understand the internet because the kids actually understand the internet.
And we transmit that notion in our everyday conversation. IRL is what we say when we're talking about anything that is not on the internet, IRL, in real life, with the implicit assumption being that what happens on the internet is not real, is somehow less material.
Maybe the internet is not real in the sense that it's just a lot of code and programming, but the conversations you have are real. When you have a real conversation with a real person on the internet, that is real. To say IRL doesn't mean everything that happens on the internet is viewed as not real. It just differentiates the real-world experiences from the online experiences.
This assumption undergirds a lot of online harassment, because people believe that their targets are not necessarily real people or are not whole people.
But Katherine, you said earlier in this lecture that they do view their targets as real people, at least when it comes to websites.
So on websites where comments are not anonymous, what often ends up happening is that you'll have super toxic users posting things that they know will get deleted, but instead they target the moderators, the actual human beings that they know will have to read these comments as part of their jobs.
The actual human beings. They view their targets as real people.
They target the moderators, the actual human beings that they know will have to read these comments as part of their jobs. Because people believe that their targets are not necessarily real people or are not whole people. The actual human beings that they know will have to read these comments as part of their jobs. Because people believe that their targets are not necessarily real people.
Do you see how backwards your logic is?
We apprehend avatars on the internet as being akin to non-player characters in a video game, as being unreal, the actual human beings that they know will have to read these comments.
As far as comparing avatars to non-player characters, I've played enough video games to know damn well players treat other players different than NPCs if that is the route you are planning to go with this.
And so, why the Mobius strip? Well, because there has to be a way to explain a fundamental contradiction with online harassment.
You're trying to explain a contradiction in online harassment with a contradiction in your lecture.
The actual human beings that they know will have to read these comments, people believe that their targets are not necessarily real people. Online harassment is a profoundly motivated phenomenon. People really want to do it, and partially because they believe that they're accomplishing something. It's not just something that is done for the sake of having a quick laugh.
There is harassment that is done with the intent of accomplishing something, such as trying to teach someone a lesson with a swatting. Then there are things people do for laughs, like sending pizzas to your house. I can't disagree with your last point.
When you look at the online harassment of women and minorities and minoritized peoples, people of color, LGBT people, it's often profoundly politically motivated.
The online harassment of women and minorities can also be motivated by them deliberately antagonizing trolls, manipulating information, or flat out lying. Randy Harper lied about getting swatted. Her self-provided evidence that was supposed to prove it happened said no tactical teams were dispatched. Brianna Wu wrote a terrible article claiming Samus was trans. Instead of owning up to her mistake, she doubled down with another article and was a steady stream of tweets implying all the criticism she was receiving was sexism, harassment, etc., etc. After all these years, Anita Sarkeesian still has yet to address issues with her video series, Tropes vs. Women in Video Games. All I've seen out of these people who are just mere victims of their harassment is they will lie and manipulate just as much as anyone else to get ahead, but in the case of what some call professional victims, they always fall back on their harassment when they actually need to own up to something. Not to mention, most of them have financial interests or personal agendas they are pushing by being constant victims of harassment. When I see them post things like this on Twitter, I don't see women who are traumatized by their harassment, I see childish behavior. In both these cases, they were being smartasses, and they are the ones who want to be taken serious. I don't agree with the harassment any of you receive, but if you don't think any of you bring it on yourselves, you are ignorant. Harassment has to be dealt with from both ends. If these women and minorities would knock it off with their nonsense, the harassment probably wouldn't be as bad. Sometimes people get harassed that don't deserve it, but when you act like some of these people do, it's difficult to believe they did nothing to bring it on themselves, or at the very least, make it worse than it already was. The one thing you people never talk about is explaining to others how to reduce the harassment they receive by behaving yourselves and being honest. You can lecture for the rest of your life trying to explain harassment. You can spend the rest of your life trying to figure it out. Oftentimes you blame only the harassers when sometimes you need to blame yourselves. It has to be dealt with from both ends.
These people are seen as existential threats to a given community. So to take gaming as a cardinal example, the world that I happen to be involved in the world of gaming, women are seen as the censorious mommies that are going to take the boys' toys away, ultimately. That we are going to have a very ugly material effect on the world of these mostly young, mostly white, mostly male gamers.
Katherine, when Brianna wrote that article about Samus, someone tried to edit a wiki page saying Samus was trans by citing her article. The people moderating the wiki for Samus said the article was not credible enough and did not accept the change.
These people are seen as existential threats to a given community.
I don't cover much drama on YouTube, but if I decided to cover the nonsense that comes out of your side, we would be here for hours. You people lie and manipulate, yet show no remorse for your wrongdoings. The people who surround you have no desire to call any of you out or hold any of you accountable. Whenever the shoe is on the other foot and you are the ones on the moral low ground, you just stick your head in the ground and pretend you are better than everyone else.
In the world of gaming, women are seen as the censorious mommies that are going to take the boys' toys away, ultimately.
The issues people take with your side are a hell of a lot more than just a threat of you taking our games away.
That we are going to have a very ugly material effect on the world of these mostly young, mostly white, mostly male gamers.
I'm getting sick of this mostly white, mostly male gamers narrative your side keeps spinning. If people like Randy, Brianna, and Anita refuse to publicly acknowledge issues such as the ones I brought up in this video, then you need to look at your own side, because they are not white male gamers, yet they also have problems.
And so you might then ask, well, if that's true, then where does the unreality bit comes in? The actual human beings that they know will have to read these comments. These people clearly, the harassers clearly see a threat. They see an existential threat to their way of life, to a material space that they exist in. Where does the unreality come in? The actual human beings that they know will have to read these comments. Well, that's where the Mobius strip comes in. This is the Mobius strip of reality and unreality. A sociological form that describes the approach that people take to interaction online, where things are real when it is convenient and unreal when it's not convenient for them.
I'm really not accepting your unreality premise. I could give any number of reasons why people harass others and why it's such a problem with the internet, but the target being viewed as an unreal person isn't the first thing that comes to mind.
And so what ends up happening is that on the one hand, women can be perceived as real enough to constitute an existential threat.
What also ends up happening is your side is loaded with lies and manipulation that go under the radar because it wouldn't fit the narrative you're crafting if you told everyone in your lecture the full story.
But because they are apprehended through the medium of the interfacing medium of the internet, we are seen as sort of akin to celebrities in a way.
When you become famous on the internet, you are what some might call an e-celebrity. Guess what? They have to deal with the same type of stuff any other celebrity deals with that you are about to outline.
Think about celebrity gossip culture. You don't think of the people staring out from those magazines necessarily as fully real people. You think of them as sort of simulacra of themselves, as someone whose life you can pick apart because the media allows you to do so. Their lives are invaded. Their lives are splashed all over the front pages of magazines and newspapers and so forth. That culture of celebrity, that dissociation between the actual human being and the public persona that is created of them, that's as old as mass media.
It does create a different persona in the sense the image you have for what someone is like in media does not always reflect what they are like if you meet them in person. That doesn't mean we view them as a non-person. If you didn't view them as people you might be interested in, then I doubt gossip columns or tabloid magazines would be as popular as they are.
What's different about the present is that the internet allows for that celebritization to occur for almost anyone, but without the benefits of celebrity. So no limousines, no security detail, no people to open your mail, and so forth.
I would agree with most of what you just said.
And that's the interface through which much online harassment occurs. People see the target of online harassment as existing in a reality sufficient enough to constitute perhaps a threat or someone who is having a material impact on the world that needs to be stopped. Think about all the conspiracy theories surrounding feminists, right? All the nasty things that we're supposed to be doing to the world, to the criminal justice system, to education, to the internet, etc.
Or think about all the lies and manipulation feminists spew, and the nasty things they actually are doing. And that's not to say you, Katherine, it's to say any feminist who lies and manipulates and gets away with it because of listen and believe culture, where you are helping to raise a society to just listen and believe anything that comes out of a feminist's mouth, and any criticism, no matter how legitimate, is labeled as sexism, misogyny, or just being hateful.
They believe we're having a real impact.
Anita and Zoe spoke at the UN and want to define what is considered free speech as harassment.
Think about all the conspiracy theories surrounding feminists.
The UN report that was intended to help change things was so bad that even Zoe Quinn and Randy Harper both criticized it. That report was so bad, it received backlash from both sides.
Right, all the nasty things that we're supposed to be doing.
The idea that they want to define cyber touch as harmful as physical touch is preposterous.
To the world, to the criminal justice system, to education, to the internet, etc.
You are part of this system that is so dysfunctional, yet you have the nerve to say this.
They believe we're having a real impact.
You are having a real impact. The only reason it hasn't been more of an impact than what you've already had is because of the incompetence and idiocy on your side. And I'm not just talking about you, I'm talking about your side in general.
But we're not apprehended as real on the internet. And that's not necessarily because these harassers are inherently awful people in and of itself. It's something that we're all trained to do. When we look at someone on the internet, their avatar, their little picture that comprises their Twitter avatar, they come to us as words on a screen. If we play an online video game, they come to us as a 3D avatar with mystical connotations and affections and so forth. It's hard to look at, say, a World of Warcraft avatar of a troll with blue skin and tusks and think that's a real person behind that, a real human being like myself. You instead approach them as, again, an NPC in a video game.
I played World of Warcraft for many years. Whenever I saw an avatar of another player, I always viewed it as a real person behind the character. If they were part of my faction, I might stop and say hi. If they were the other faction, one of us might pick a fight with each other. I don't think I've ever interacted with another player character like it was just some random NPC.
They are seen as existing in this strange liminal space between reality and unreality. And so that's where anonymity then comes in. It can occasionally inflect the resulting harassment. Sometimes anonymous harassers may be more explicit, may be more brutal. But if you look at what's actually occurring in terms of ginning up online hate mobs, who's responsible for it, and so on, what you find again and again is that the harassers, say, for instance, people who make online hate videos that target people like Anita Sarkeesian, for instance, who many of you have just heard speak now, they're not anonymous. They're well known. They have legal identities. They have jobs that are known to the public, and yet they get away with what they do.
They can do it because what they are doing is not illegal. It's no different than what you are doing right now. You are lecturing in front of an audience about how they are the terrible people. You are doing the exact same thing you accuse YouTubers of doing. Katherine, you are committing cyber harassment right now. This cyber touch is harmful to me like real-life touch. I'm so traumatized by this, I need to speak at the UN so ideologues can no longer do lectures that are posted online because of the people that might come after me as a result of your words. And by the way,
and yet they get away with what they do.
You and the rest of your cohorts also get away with what you do.
The reason for this, very simply, is because there is a lack of accountability that emerges from the fundamental belief that the actions they take on the internet are just words and not real. And there are a welter of moral and ethical justifications that enter into the frame as well.
I wouldn't mind if there was more accountability for legitimate wrongdoing, but you are talking about words and what those words can lead to. For almost every argument you make against these YouTubers who make videos you don't like, I can make equally compelling arguments against feminists who do the same thing on other social media such as Twitter and Tumblr, as well as what is published by feminist writers on blogs and news sites.
And so, with that note, on that note, it is, I think, appropriate to leave you to understand that anonymity is not really the driving force here. Anonymity is one of many things that can inflect online harassment. But much more important is what psychologist John Suler called the dissociative imagination, where we distance ourselves and our sense of moral and personal and physical responsibility for our actions every time we sit behind a keyboard. There's a distancing effect that occurs when we use the internet that has nothing to do with anonymity.
You just said there was a lack of responsibility when you are on the internet. People distance themselves from their morals because they can do or say things on the internet that would lead to some form of accountability had they done it in the real world. Distancing yourself from your own morals has nothing to do with viewing your target as a non-person. Where I come from, it's called being an asshole. Most of these people doing the harassment are assholes.
If we get rid of anonymity from the internet just tomorrow, waved a magic wand, the toxicity problems that we are all concerned about would remain. And we have to think of smarter solutions. Our virtual future depends upon it. Thank you.
Smarter solutions? One of the best solutions was to deal with this stuff as discreetly as possible. When you make a big story out of it, it emboldens the harassers. It also encourages others to join in. Look at how many videos keep cropping up that call Anita out on her lies and manipulation because she refuses to concede any criticism. Just imagine how many people would have moved on by now if only Anita would admit she's wrong. I will not deny Anita brought mainstream attention to a legitimate issue in the sense there is legitimate issues with online harassment, but one of my biggest gripes with her is how she is dealing with it and her solutions. Just as I have an issue with your ideas that they view their targets as real people and not real people.
They target the moderators, the actual human beings, because people believe that their targets are not necessarily real people.